Our guest is Michelle Malkin, who is a multidimensional journalist, author. She's a syndicated columnist. She is also now with a new television series on CRTV. Let me ask you about Senator Harry Reid. He is officially stepping down. We covered his farewell ceremony yesterday in the Kennedy caucus room. This morning he has written an op-ed for the New York Times called Farewell, Fair Senate, defending Obamacare, saying ending the filibuster on most nominations was the right thing to do. He will, of course, be replaced by Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, and among those paying tribute, the House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi. Listen carefully to what she said.
It has been my privilege to work side by side with Harry Reid for more than a decade. To observe Harry is to observe a master at work. His effectiveness sprang from his commitment to his values, but his respect also for his colleagues. Harry and I had many occasions to evaluate the leadership and the courage of our colleagues as we've entered one fray or another. In all of my years, again, more than 10, working with Harry as leaders, he always spoke in the most glowing, respectful, and understanding way about all of his senators and Republican senators as well. Very respectful of everyone's point of view, the constituents they represented. Never anything but the finest word.
Michelle Malkin.
That's fake news right there. I think to any half-alert denizen of the Beltway swamp, Harry Reid has conducted himself in a manner that might most politely be called brass knuckles thuggery, and certainly the victims of his rhetoric and his actions over the years can attest to that. But I think this says as much about Nancy Pelosi as it does about Harry Reid and this, very stubborn and amazing and surreal attempt to rewrite the history in front of our noses. Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas, correctly described Harry Reid's political behavior as quote unquote cancerous. And I wish there had been a rebuttal to that elegy.
Well, let me ask you about fake news, because another comment from another speaker, Hillary Clinton, who also spoke yesterday at the Harry Reid tribute, the outgoing Senate Democratic leader. Here's what she said.
Let me just mention briefly one threat in particular that should concern all Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, especially those who serve in our Congress. The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly. Bipartisan legislation is making its way through Congress to boost the government's response to foreign propaganda, and Silicon Valley is starting to grapple with the challenge and threat of fake news. It's imperative that leaders in both the private sector and the public sector step up to protect our democracy and innocent lives.
Hillary Clinton yesterday here in Washington, D.C. Does she have a point?
I wish she would spare us all the sanctimony. I'll get to the fake news in a second, but this is a woman who is now warning about the risk to American lives of fakery, and she ran the State Department that gave us a fake, phony pretext about Benghazi, blaming a video on it when it was clear in all the machinations behind the scenes, of course, that they all knew that what the real reason for the Benghazi attack was. So let's talk about this fake news. I mean, we've been hearing about it thousands of times a day. It is a tactic. And I can tell you, as somebody who has operated as an independent purveyor of journalism, somebody who was at the vanguard of the conservative blogosphere, that this kind of strategy of marginalizing people outside of the traditional media elite has a purpose, and that purpose is to prevent new competitors in that marketplace. So smear and with a broad brush, everybody who is not attached to one of the dinosaur networks, or who does not have some Sorbonne-like certification from a top Ivy League J school. And then everybody gets associated with the rogue operators out there who are spreading, truly fake news. Journalism is not rocket science. It is not brain surgery. Anybody can do it. And of course, that is a threat to people who are trying to control narratives. And of course, we should vet every single news source, but the solution is not to ban or limit the number of voices out there. It has always been my opinion that the answer to bad or fake or phony or unreliable speech is more and better speech. And that is why I'm involved in CRTV.com.
Let's go to Brad in International Falls, Minnesota, Republican line. Question for you first. How cold is it there this morning?
Well, it's not bad. It's normal. It's cold, but it's okay. I mean,
what's normal? What's normal, Brad?
Well, I was at a funeral here about a week ago, and a lady asked me what it was like 60 years ago, because she was telling me that it was warmer then 60 years ago than it was today. And it's warmer than normal right now, but we can't change that, okay? Nor can man, so.
Okay.
But,
go ahead with your question or comment.
We're talking about the fake news. That's really interesting, and I keep listening and hearing about this, and I shake my head at, they want to keep blaming the Russians. Well, Russians didn't write Hillary's emails. She did. She was the one that didn't want to hand them over. She was the one that said that she handed them all over. Well, that was a complete lie. That's fake news. And to our panelist there, Michelle, I mean, I think the world of her. I really do. And I think that she does know, but she's like in with the wolves again on C-SPAN, because I think C-SPAN has turned into nothing more than CNN or MSNBC. So
why do you say that, Brad?
Well, because it's always slanted, and you always are asking questions from people like myself that I know that you disagree with me wholeheartedly.
I just asked you what the temperature was today. I was just curious.
No, that isn't what I'm saying. You know exactly. You're just diverting. But you're a Democrat.
I really just was curious how cold it was in International Falls, Minnesota. But Brad, thank you for the call. You still on the line? I don't want to hang up on you. Brad, well, we'll get a response.
Well, I appreciate his opinion. I think it's good for all of us to get feedback. But I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here sitting with you, Steve. I tell this to people all the time. When I have to go out on media tours and descend from my mountaintop in Colorado, the thing I always look most forward to is this time and space. And C-SPAN's history is a proud one of doing justice to the First Amendment and the privilege we have as information providers. I don't know what your politics are after all of these years. And I think probably because there's been so much bias in cable news programming and the pretense of objectivity that, listeners and viewers who are not accustomed to straight questions and straight unfiltered delivery of news that's happening on Capitol Hill, that they automatically assume there must be bias. This is a horrible thing if you think about it, that people feel that that the people that are on their cameras have contempt for them. And that is something that there ought to be much more introspection about in elite media circles. And instead, they're doubling and tripling down on the same ways of delivering their narratives as they have over the past 30 years. I do want to say that he absolutely has a point about For example, the dinosaur networks, which are now all broadcasting Hillary's comments and condemning things like Pizzagate. But does anybody remember Rathergate? That was CBS and Dan Rather who faked Texas Air National Guard documents. And it was those little citizen bloggers and citizen journalists who were not credentialed who were the ones that brought them down. Or the exploding trucks on NBC, or even in this past election cycle when CNN had to admit, and I remember Jake Tapper saying that it was, quote, journalistically terrifying or horrifying that there was someone within their organization that was leaking questions to Hillary Clinton.
I think he called it malpractice, yes.
Yes, he did.